You have been reciting these exact words since you were a little child. You bowed your head in Sunday school, folded your hands, and repeated them perfectly. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. You say it in church every Sunday morning. You whisper it in a cold hospital waiting room when the doctor is taking too long. You repeat it in the middle of the night when the house is completely quiet and the weight of your family's problems feels like it is physically crushing your chest. It is the most famous, most widely spoken prayer in the history of the entire world. But here is the heartbreaking truth that nobody in your church ever stopped to tell you. For millions of faithful, dedicated believers, this prayer has completely lost its power. It has become a religious script, a habit, a sequence of familiar English words that we repeat on absolute autopilot while our minds wander to what we are going to eat for lunch or what bills need to be paid. And what is the result? You pray it, but heaven feels completely silent. You ask for your daily bread, but you still feel overwhelmed by financial anxiety. You ask for deliverance from evil, but you still watch your children or grandchildren struggle, and you feel utterly powerless to help them. The same spiritual battles keep defeating you, week after week, year after year. Have you ever stopped to wonder why? Why would Jesus Christ, the Son of God, give his followers a prayer that feels so dry, so repetitive, and so completely disconnected from the heavy burdens you carry in your everyday life? The answer to that question is going to shake the very foundation of your faith today. Because the problem is not with God, and the problem is not with you. The problem is with the words themselves. You see, when Jesus sat on the side of that mountain in Matthew chapter 6 and taught his disciples how to touch the very heart of God, he did not speak in King James English. He did not even speak in Greek. Jesus spoke in Aramaic, an ancient, rhythmic, profoundly deep spiritual language where every single word carries layers of divine energy, power, and authority. When the Bible was translated into English centuries later, something tragic happened. We got the basic theology, but we lost the spiritual frequency. We traded a dynamic, living, breathing encounter with the Creator for a flat, two-dimensional religious poem. The English translation you memorized barely scratches the surface of what Jesus was actually unleashing into the atmosphere. What if I told you that hidden inside the original Aramaic syllables of the Lord's Prayer is a direct blueprint for divine healing? What if the real meaning of this prayer is not what Sunday school taught you at all, but a spiritual weapon designed to break the invisible chains holding you back? If you're tired of performing your faith and you're ready to actually experience the power that Jesus intended, then you need to listen very closely to what comes next. Because we are about to peel back the layers of tradition and look directly into the heart of the original language of the Son of God. Let us start at the very beginning. The very first two words you say every time you pray this prayer, Our Father. In our modern English minds, the word Father carries a specific weight. For some of you, it brings a sense of warmth and protection. But for many others, it subconsciously triggers an image of a distant judge, a stern authority figure sitting on a golden throne far away in the clouds, keeping a list of your mistakes, waiting for you to perform well enough to be heard. When you say Our Father in English, there is often an invisible wall between you and the divine. But when Jesus opened his mouth and spoke to the crowds, he used the Aramaic word, abun. I want you to take a deep breath right now and just listen to the vibration of that word, abun. This is not just a title. It is a cosmic explosion of meaning that the English word father simply cannot hold. In the ancient Aramaic language, the word abun is a combination of four deep elemental sounds. The first part, ab, refers to the source, the parent of all that exists. But it's not just a person, it's the birthing flow. It describes a father-mother God who is constantly, in this very microsecond, breathing life into the universe. The second part, boon, refers to the seed, the vibration, the light that moves through the darkness. So, when Jesus taught you to pray a boon, he wasn't telling you to address a distant king. He was teaching you to plug yourself back into the power source of the universe. He was saying, O birthing force, O flow of the universe, O source of the light that creates all things. Do you feel the difference in your spirit? Abun is not a static noun. It is an active, breathing verb. It means that the God you are praying to is not out there. He is the very breath inside your lungs. He is the heartbeat that is keeping you alive while you watch this video. When you understand Abun, the Father is no longer a judge you have to please. He becomes the womb of creation that is currently holding you. For the 70-year-old grandmother watching this, feeling lonely or forgotten, Abun means you are literally being breathed into existence by a love that has no end. For the man struggling with his health, Abun means the original source of your body is still flowing through your veins. The English translation makes God a destination. The Aramaic original makes God the atmosphere. By changing this one single word in your heart, you are removing the greatest barrier to your prayers. You are moving from begging a distant God to surrendering to a present source. But this is only the beginning. Because the next part of this prayer, Who art in heaven, contains a secret about where God actually lives that will completely change how you look at the world around you. After we address the source, the Abun, we usually move straight to the location. Who art in heaven? In our Western English-speaking minds, heaven is a destination. It's a place you go after you die, if you were good enough. It's a physical location, somewhere beyond the stars, with pearly gates and golden streets. But think about the psychological damage that translation does to your prayer life. If God is in heaven and you are on earth, then there is a vast, empty vacuum between you and the help you need. It makes you feel like you have to scream your prayers loud enough to reach the ionosphere. It makes you feel like God is a spectator, watching your life from a safe, comfortable distance while you struggle with your health, your grief, or your bills down here. But the Aramaic word Jesus used was shmanya. Listen to that sound, shmanya. In the ancient Middle Eastern worldview, Shmanya did not mean a place in the sky. It comes from the root word Shem, which means light, sound, vibration, or name. And the ending, Aya, implies something that is everywhere, expanding and infinite. So when Jesus said God is in Shmanya, he wasn't giving you an address. He was describing a state of being. He was saying that God exists within the very vibration and light that holds the universe together. In modern terms, you could say that Shmanya is the unified field. It is the space between your atoms. It is the invisible energy that allows your heart to beat without you telling it to. When you pray, Who art in Shmanya, you are acknowledging that God is not up there. He is in here. He is the very fabric of the reality you are standing in. Imagine a fish swimming in the ocean, crying out, O great ocean, who art in the distant clouds, please come save me. That is how we sound when we pray the English version of this prayer. We are asking the water to come to us, not realizing we are already submerged in it. For the person watching this who feels like God has abandoned them, or that he is too busy with the big problems of the world to care about your localized pain, the word Shmanya is your rescue. It means there is no place where God is not. He is in the breath you just took. He is in the silence of your room. He is in the very cells of your body that are crying out for healing. Heaven is not a later. Heaven is a now. It is the spiritual atmosphere that is currently pressing against your skin. By shifting your focus from a distant heaven to the vibrating Shmanya, you stop trying to reach God and you start resting in Him. You move from the stress of the long-distance call to the peace of a face-to-face conversation. But once we realize how close the source is, we have to ask, what is our responsibility to this source? That leads us to the next mystery, the one that usually sounds like a religious ritual, but is actually a key to spiritual authority. Hallowed be thy name. In Aramaic, this isn't just a compliment to God. It is a cleansing of your own internal space. After we acknowledge that God is the ever-present vibration surrounding us, we say these famous words, Hallowed be thy name. In our modern ears, hallowed is a museum word. It feels archaic, distant, and purely ceremonial. We think we are simply telling God how great He is, like a subject bowing before a king and saying, Your name is very holy. But let me ask you something honestly. Does God, the creator of a billion galaxies, really need a human being to tell Him His name is holy? Does He need your compliments to feel powerful? Of course not. So if this phrase isn't for His benefit, it must be for yours. The Aramaic phrase Jesus spoke was Nethkadash Shmach. And when you pull back the curtain on these words, the religious ritual disappears and a spiritual technology emerges. The word Nethkadash comes from a root that means to sanctify. But more specifically, it means to sweep clean, to clear out, or to make a space holy by removing the clutter. Imagine you have a guest house and you are expecting the most important person in the world to stay there. what is the first thing you do? You don't just stand outside and yell, "This house is great." No, you go inside. You sweep the floors. You dust the corners. You throw out the trash. You clear the space so the guest has a place to dwell. When you pray Nethkadash Shmach, you aren't just complimenting God. You are asking for the divine vibration to sweep through your own heart. You are saying, "May your light be gathered in a holy place within me. Clear out my mental noise. Sweep away my distractions. Remove the clutter of my anxiety so that your Shem, your vibration, has room to move." For many of you watching this, especially those in the golden years of life, your internal house has become very crowded. It is crowded with memories of the past, with worries about the future, with the constant noise of the news and the clutter of medical reports. Your mind is so full of other names. The name of your illness, the name of your debt, the name of your grief, that there is no room for the one name. By praying the Aramaic Nethkadash, you are performing a spiritual house cleaning. You are centering your focus. You are hallowing a space inside your consciousness where only God's vibration is allowed to vibrate. Think about the power of that. Most of our prayers fail because we try to pray from a cluttered room. We try to talk to God while our hearts are still vibrating with fear or anger. But Jesus says, first, sweep the room, focus the light, clear the space. When your internal space is hallowed, when it is cleared of the ego and the noise, that is when the real authority begins to flow. That is when your prayer stops being a wish and starts being a command. Once the space is clear, we are ready for the next massive shift. We move from the internal clearing to the external manifestation. We arrive at the phrase that everyone thinks they understand, but almost everyone gets wrong. Thy kingdom come. In Aramaic, this is not about waiting for a future world. It's about planting a seed in this one. Once the room is swept and the focus is centered, we arrive at the most misunderstood request in the entire Bible. Thy kingdom come. If you ask the average person in your church what this means, they will tell you it's about the end times. They think we are praying for the world to end so we can finally go to that distant heaven we talked about. It makes the kingdom feel like a political event or a future destination. And because you think it is in the future, you don't expect it to have any power over your life right now. But the Aramaic words Jesus whispered were, Tete Malkuthak. Listen to the rhythm of that, Tete Malkuthak. The word Tete doesn't just mean to arrive, like a bus arriving at a station. It means to manifest, to come into bloom or to ripen. It is the image of a fruit that has been growing in secret and is finally ready to be eaten. And the word Malkuthak is even more explosive. While we translate it as kingdom, the ancient Aramaic root refers to a kingly, queenly sovereignty. It refers to a state of I-canness. It is the Shem, the vibration of God, becoming a solid reality in the physical world. So, when you pray Teti Malkuthach, you aren't saying, God, please come and change the government. You're saying, may your vibrant sovereignty ripen inside of me. You're asking for the iconness of God to become the iconness of your own life. For many of you watching, you feel like you have lost your sovereignty. You feel like the kingdom of your life is being ruled by a medical diagnosis. You feel like the kingdom of your family is being ruled by conflict or distance. You feel like you are a victim of your circumstances. But Jesus is giving you a spiritual reset button. By praying Tete Malkuthach, you are declaring that the ripening of God's power is happening in your situation right now. You are inviting the blueprint of the divine to override the blueprint of your struggle. You are saying, let the sovereignty of love come into full bloom in this body, in this house, and in this moment. The English version makes you a passive observer waiting for a king. The Aramaic version makes you a partner in the birthing process. Think about a seed under the soil. It doesn't wait for the sun to exist. It responds to the sun that is already there until it breaks through the dirt. That breakthrough is the Teti. That is the kingdom coming. When you stop waiting for a future kingdom and start inviting the ripening sovereignty, your prayer changes from a weak wish to a divine activation. You stop asking God to do something, and you start allowing God to be something through you. But for this sovereignty to ripen, something has to give. You cannot have two kings on one throne. And that leads us to the most difficult, most surrendered, and most powerful part of the prayer. The part where we stop fighting and start flowing. Thy will be done. In Aramaic, this is not about resignation to a bad fate. It's about becoming a conductor for lightning. For many of you, the phrase, thy will be done, has become a spiritual safety net for unanswered prayers. You pray for healing, but then you add, if it be thy will, just in case it doesn't happen. In our Western minds, we have been conditioned to think that God's will is a mysterious, often painful decree that we must simply accept without question. It feels like a heavy burden. It feels like a parent telling a child, because I said so. But when you look at the Aramaic words Jesus actually spoke, Nethabi Tsevianak, the entire energy of the prayer shifts from a heavy weight to a surging current. The word Nethabi means let it be done or let it be created, but it implies a coming together of two things. It's like a cosmic yes between heaven and earth. And the word Tsevianach is the real secret. In Aramaic, this does not mean a legal command or a cold decree. It comes from a root that means desire, delight, or heart's passion. Think about that for a moment. When you pray Nethabi Tsevianach, you aren't saying, God, do whatever you want, even if I hate it. You are saying, may your heart's passion and your deepest delight become the reality of my life. Do you see the difference? God's will is not a chore. It is His delight. It is His passion for wholeness, for peace, and for life to thrive. By praying this in the original spirit, you are stopping the internal tug of war. You are aligning your own fragile, flickering desires with the infinite passion of the Creator. For those of you watching who are tired of fighting, tired of trying to force things to happen in your family, tired of struggling against your own body, this is your moment of release. You are not giving up. You are connecting. Imagine a river. Resignation is like being swept away and drowning. But alignment, praying, Thy will be done, in Aramaic, is like putting your boat in the center of the current and letting the power of the river take you where you need to go. Jesus is teaching us to be conductors. A conductor doesn't create the electricity. It simply provides a path with the least resistance so the lightning can reach the ground. When you pray Nethabit Sevyanak, you are saying, O Source, I am removing the resistance of my ego. I am removing the resistance of my fear. Let your passion flow through me until it hits the earth. This is where the supernatural meets the physical. This is where heaven and earth finally shake hands. And that leads us to the specific location of this manifestation, the part of the prayer that reminds us that God is not just interested in your soul, but in the very ground you walk on earth as it is in heaven. In Aramaic, this is a chemical reaction. It is the final step before we ask for the things we physically need to survive. We have cleared the room. We have invited the ripening. And we have aligned our hearts with God's passion. Now, we come to the great bridge, on earth as it is in heaven. In our modern English understanding, we treat this as a comparison. We think we are asking God to make the world down here look more like the world up there. It feels poetic, but it also feels impossible. When you look at the news, when you look at the pain in your community, or when you look at the physical limitation of your own aging body, earth feels light years away from heaven. But the Aramaic phrase Jesus used was, Aichanna the Bashmaya af bara. And this is where the mystery becomes a manifestation. The word Aichanna does not just mean like. It implies a mirroring or a consistency of form. Think of a high-definition projector. If the film inside the projector is clear and focused, the image on the screen is perfect. If the film is scratched or dirty, the image on the screen is distorted. Heaven is the film. Earth is the screen. When you pray Aichanad Bashmaya af bara, you're not asking God to change the screen. You're asking for the unobstructed light of the source to shine through you so perfectly that the physical reality has no choice but to reflect the spiritual reality. In the Aramaic worldview, earth, Ara, is not just the soil beneath your feet. It refers to everything that is solid, dense, and physical. This includes your bank account. This includes your relationships. Most importantly, for those of you dealing with chronic pain or illness, this includes the very cells of your body. Jesus was teaching you a law of spiritual physics. The visible must obey the invisible. For the person watching this who feels trapped in a physical earth that is full of decay, perhaps your joints ache, your energy is fading, or your mind feels clouded. This phrase is your divine alignment. You are declaring that the vibration of health, peace, and wholeness that exists in the Shmanya, the spiritual atmosphere, is now being stamped into the matter of your physical life. You're saying, as it is in the light, so let it be in the flesh. This is the handshake between dimensions. It is the moment where your prayer stops being spiritual and starts being material. You are calling for a consistency between what God desires and what you are actually experiencing. By shifting to the Aramaic intent, you stop seeing yourself as a victim of a broken earth. You start seeing yourself as a point of entry for heaven. You are the location where the two worlds meet. You are the mirror that, when cleaned, reflects the glory of the sun onto the dark corners of the world. But once the light hits the earth, we have to deal with our most basic, daily human needs. We have to address the hunger, the lack, and the physical survival that keeps us in fear. That leads us to the part of the prayer we usually treat as a grocery list, but which is actually a lesson in divine timing. Give us this day our daily bread. In Aramaic, this is not just about a loaf of bread. It is about the sustenance of the soul. After we pray for heaven to be mirrored on earth, we ask for something very practical. Give us this day our daily bread. For most of us, especially those who grew up in the tradition of Sunday school, we were taught that this is about physical food. We think of it as a prayer for God to provide for our physical needs, our mortgage, our groceries, our electricity bills, and while God certainly cares about those things, if you view this request only through the lens of your bank account, you are missing the spiritual nuclear reactor hidden inside the words. In English, daily bread feels very small. It feels like we are asking for just enough to scrape by. But the Aramaic phrase Jesus used was Lachma de Sankanan Yauman. And when you hear the original vibration, the grocery list disappears and a cosmic sustenance is revealed. The word Lachma is often translated as bread, but in the ancient Middle East, bread was more than food, it was life force. Lakma refers to the essential fuel required for any form of creation. It is the enlightened bread. It is the wisdom you need to make a decision. It is the cellular energy your body needs to repair itself. It is the emotional strength you need to forgive a child or a spouse. Then we have the word Sankanan. This is the secret key. It doesn't just mean daily in terms of a calendar. It refers to the necessity for the next step. It is the portion that is perfectly calibrated for your specific soul at this exact moment. So, when you pray, Lakmat Sunkanan Yauman, you aren't begging for a sandwich. You're saying, Source, feed me the essential life vibration that I need for my next step in this moment of light. Think about the psychological relief this brings. For many of you watching, you are exhausted by future anxiety. You are worried about how your health will be in 5 years. You are worried about whether your savings will last another decade. You are trying to carry 5 years of bread on your back today, and it is crushing you. But Jesus is teaching you the law of the now moment. He is saying that the lachma, the divine fuel, is available in real time. Just like the manna in the wilderness, it cannot be stored and it cannot be hoarded. It must be inhaled. When you pray this in Aramaic, you are releasing the stress of the long-term lack, and you are plugging into the immediate abundance. For the person watching who feels empty, Perhaps your spirit feels dry, or your body feels like a battery that won't hold a charge. This is your activation. You're asking for the lakma of God to enter your cells, your mind, and your spirit. You are acknowledging that God is your sustainer, not just your provider. The English version makes you a beggar. The Aramaic original makes you a recipient of the divine pulse. You move from, I hope I have enough, to, I am being fed by the source right now. But as we receive this life force, we quickly realize that something often blocks the flow. There is a clog in the spiritual pipes that prevents the bread from nourishing us. And that clog is almost always found in our relationships and our past. That leads us to the most legally significant part of the prayer, the part that deals with your spiritual credit score. And forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. In Aramaic, this is not about being nice. It is about releasing a strangulation. We have asked for the divine life force, the Lachma, to fill our souls and bodies. But for many of you, even as you pray for the strength, you feel a heavy, cold blockage in your chest. You feel like the bread is being offered, but you cannot swallow it. This brings us to the most legally and spiritually significant part of the prayer, the part that deals with your internal credit score. And forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. In our botting, in our modern English-speaking churches, we have turned this into a moral lesson about being nice. We think it's a simple trade-off. If I'm nice to people who hurt me, then God will be nice to me. It feels like a chore. It feels like we are being forced to let people off the hook who don't deserve it. And because it feels unfair, we often do it only with our lips, while our hearts remain tight, angry, and resentful. But the Aramaic word Jesus used was shbok. Listen to the sharpness of that sound, shbok. In the ancient world, this was not a word used by poets or moralists. It was a word used by sailors and prisoners. It literally means to untie, to let go of a rope, or to release a knot. When Jesus taught you to pray, shbok l'chobein, he wasn't giving you a moral command to be a doormat. He was giving you a manual for spiritual survival. In the Aramaic worldview, a debt or a sin, chobein, is seen as a tangled cord that physically binds two people together. When someone hurts you, or when you fail someone else, an invisible rope is tied between your hearts. And as long as that rope is there, the life force, lachma, cannot flow freely through you. Resentment is a spiritual strangulation. For the 65-year-old man watching this, still carrying anger toward a father who died 20 years ago, that rope is still there, and it is draining your energy. For the woman who cannot forgive herself for a mistake she made in her youth, you have tied a knot around your own throat. When you pray shbok in the original Aramaic spirit, you are performing a spiritual surgery. You are saying, I am untying the ropes of the past. I am letting go of the strands of bitterness that bind me to those who harmed me. I am releasing the hidden loans of energy I have been holding on to. Forgiveness is not a feeling. It is a release of tension. Think about your physical body for a moment. When you hold a grudge, where do you feel it? You feel it in your jaw. You feel it in your shoulders. You feel it in the acidity of your stomach. Your body is literally indebted to your anger. By praying Shbuk, you are telling your nervous system that it is safe to let go. Jesus is teaching us the law of the exhale. You cannot inhale the daily bread of God's presence if your lungs are still full of the stale air of yesterday's grievances. You must exhale the debt before you can inhale the life. By shifting to the Aramaic intent, you stop trying to feel forgiveness and you start executing it. You move from the guilt of not being holy enough to the freedom of being unbound. You are clearing the pipes so that the up wound can finally flood your life with the power you've been seeking. But as soon as we untie the knots of the past, we realize there is still a battle ahead. We realize that we are walking through a world full of traps and shadows. That leads us to the final cry for protection. The one that decides whether you stay free or fall back into the pit. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. In Aramaic, this is not a request for a safe path. It is a warrior's plea for spiritual discernment. We have reached the final gate where the knots of the past are untied and the spirit is clear. We stand ready to move forward. But we must acknowledge that the world is filled with shadows and voices designed to pull us back into the noise. This brings us to the most protective cry of the entire prayer, which is the request to not be led into temptation, but to be delivered from evil. In our common English Bibles, this phrase has always felt slightly confusing because we wonder why a loving father would ever lead his children into a trap. But the Aramaic word nesuna reveals a much deeper truth because it refers to a state of forgetfulness or losing your spiritual rhythm. When you pray this, you are asking the source to keep you awake so that when a bad medical report or a financial struggle hits, you do not forget who you truly are in the light. When we speak of being delivered from evil, we must look at the Aramaic word bisha, which does not describe a monster with a pitchfork, but rather a state of unripeness or being out of time with the divine. You are asking to be snatched away from the chaos and the errors that lead to spiritual disconnection. It is a warrior's plea for discernment so that your internal anchor remains firm no matter how hard the winds of the world may blow. We then close this divine activation with the triumphant doxology, declaring that the kingdom, the power, and the glory belong to the source forever. In Aramaic, this is the final seal of authority, where Malkutha represents your divine sovereignty. Hyla represents the raw life force flowing through you, and Teshputa represents the blinding radiance of the light. You are no longer just reciting a religious poem, but you are affirming the very structure of the universe within your own soul. When we finally say Ameyn, we are not simply saying that the prayer is over or finished. In the original spirit, this word means, so be it, or I ground this in my physical body. It is the spiritual equivalent of hitting the enter key on the keyboard of creation to confirm that the transaction is complete. You are moving from a state of wishing to a state of being where you are a conductor for the atmosphere of heaven right here on earth. My friend, you have spent your whole life repeating these words, but today you have finally accessed their true legacy. You are not a victim of your circumstances or your age, but a point of entry for the infinite power of the Creator. Do not let the forgetfulness of the world take this revelation from you the moment this video ends, but stay plugged into the vibration of the Abwoon. If this journey through the original language of the Son of God has moved your spirit, I invite you to make a bold declaration right now. Do not just move to the next thing, but take a moment to seal this truth by typing the word Ameyn in the comments below. Let it be a stake in the ground and a sign that the sovereignty of God has finally ripened in your life today. Share this with someone who is struggling with fear, because one single word of truth can break a lifetime of invisible chains.